everyone, and welcome to the Unisys ClearPath webinar. Today's topic, Win with ClearPath MCP Gold. Let's get started. Our first speaker for you today is Trudy Widmer. She's Product Manager for ClearPath Software Series. And with that, Trudy, the audience is yours.
Thank you very much, Matt. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for Win with ClearPath MCP Gold. It's our latest introduction to the ClearPath MCP Software Series. Today we'll be talking about the different options that are available for you with ClearPath MCP Gold. We'll talk about the different versions that you have that are available and the different types of workloads. We'll talk about your licensing options, and we'll talk a little bit about a 90-day evaluation key that's available. We'll talk about the services that are now available with MCP Gold, and then we'll open it up for questions. As you've seen in the past several years as we've gone forward with our ClearPath Software Series, we've become very, very flexible with ClearPath MCP. We still have our optimized infrastructure with our Libra and Dorado servers that run on integrated hardware and software offering. And then we have our ClearPath Software Series, which today we're introducing our third production system, which is Gold, and that now runs along with Bronze and Silver. And in the future, we'll be working towards our ClearPath Forward hybrid cloud environments. The evolution of ClearPath Software Series is now in its third year. The first year we introduced development environments, and those were the first workloads that we allowed you to run on a strictly Intel environment of your choosing. The second year we introduced Bronze and Silver, which was for the first time we allowed you to run a production environment on an Intel environment of your choosing. And we also began allowing you to run it on a hypervisor, such as VMware or Hyper-V. This year we're introducing Gold, which is our mid-tier range of products for ClearPath MCP Software Series. And again, you can run it on the hardware of your choosing. So it's a very flexible environment. The flexibility that you gain is unsurpassed with MCP Software Series. And while we allow you to run it with VMware and Hyper-V, this allows you to integrate into your environment on standard servers that you might have standardized within your environment. So for example, if you have standardized on a particular server vendor, you can lower your business risk by using the standards that you've already created in your environment. Once again, it's 100% code and data compatible between the Libra servers and the ClearPath MCP Software Series. It's a fully integrated software stack with no complex or expensive and risky integration required. It gives you the flexibility to choose your standard Intel x86 hardware and run with qualified industry standard hypervisors. And with all of this, there's no need to change your applications or data. As I said, this is the third introduction for our ClearPath Software Series for a production environment. You have, with Gold, what we're introducing are two different types of licensing metrics. One is capacity-based and the other is consumption-based, and we'll be going through those today in a lot more detail. With Gold, you have a maximum of up to 4 virtual CPMs. With Silver, you had the option of 1 or 2, and with Bronze, you just had the option of 1. With Bronze, that was a user-based environment, and Silver gave you a capacity-based environment. So Gold is following along those traditions, but now we're introducing the consumption-based model. You have general purpose and AB suite workloads that are available, as well as DR and business continuity. And then this is the migration path for our Libra 4000, 4100, and 4200 metered and non-metered clients. The operating environment, as you can see from this chart, is the UOE, which gives you approximately 50 more products available to you without additional cost. They're not optional, they're included with the base packaging. And once again, tape drives are only supported if you're running in a bare metal environment, and VSS disk is likewise only supported on a bare metal environment. Just for a moment, I'd like to talk about the latest addition to our MCP Developer Studio, and that's what we call Team Edition. So MCP Developer Studio Team Edition it has the same capacities available as you'll find with MCP Gold. So if you had an SDK workload running on your Libra 4000 server, the Team Edition might be the appropriate product for you for your development needs if the capacity requirements are such that they require a Libra 4000 type of environment. So it gives you one MCP environment, and as you can see, we have many different versions of Developer Studio that are now available. What makes this one a little bit different is the fact that you can have it capacity or consumption based, which would be similar to what you had with metered and non-metered in your Libra environment. It's supported on bare metal, or it can be run in a hypervisor environment, and all of these versions require Windows Server 2012 R2. All of these editions of Developer Studio run with the same set of software products. So whether you're running on Personal Edition or whether you're running on Team Edition, you would have the same products available to you in any of these environments. So you can do development on Personal Edition or Team Edition and have access to the same exact products. When we compare Libra 4000 to MCP Gold, our pricing model has changed. We are going to a CVU consumption-based or capacity-based type of metric. And the reason why we're doing that is because we've needed to remove performance from our pricing metric. In the past, when we were on Libra 4000 series, we controlled the performance. We, Unisys, controlled the performance. But today, you can run MCP Gold on the hardware of your choosing. And your hardware may be faster or it may be slower than what we might have chosen as a hardware platform. So because of that, we're going to what we call CVU, consumption-based or capacity-based. And we're going to go into that in some detail today. So the packaging that we have for ClearPath Software Series, just as we had with Bronze and Silver, consists of ClearPath MCP firmware and MCP software. You can run it on bare metal or on a hypervisor of VMware or Hyper-V. The workloads that are available are general purpose and AB suite, and we have BC Accelerator available should you need it. We also have a new networking feature that we're introducing for the first time on Software Series. It was actually introduced with MCP 18.0 earlier this year, and that's our networking version 3. And it's much more performant than what you had with our previous version. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And the support for ClearPath MCP Gold is our Unisys standard support. In the past, with our Libra systems, you had what we call the system type. Which we measured, all of that was always measured with MIPS for our Libra series. It was software and hardware combined, and it had a specific number of MCP CPMs. You had a specific workload processing capacity that was relative to the underlying hardware package, and we used MIPS in order to measure the usage of that particular package. It was based on performance, time, and utilization. So with the capacity sets that we're introducing with MCP Gold, we have to take performance out of the mix for this. So what it is, it's a Unisys operating environment software and a firmware layer that's combined. It doesn't include the hardware because that's an optional environment that you can select, and that environment we can make recommendations for you, and we can recommend a Unisys solution for hardware, but you have the option of choosing what that underlying hardware is. So we have virtual CPM firmware that's instantiated, and that's the MCP Central Processing Module, or the CPM. It has specific processing capacity and capability that's relative to the underlying hardware platform. You have a range of workload processing capabilities, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through the presentation. And your usage will be measured in virtual CPM seconds. And in conjunction with that, if you're running in consumption mode, we have a calibrator that runs, and we'll talk about that in more detail as well. Essentially, it's a piece of microcode that's a part of the MCP that runs in the background, and it normalizes the usage that you have of your MCP system. So we have basically two capacity profiles. One is capacity-based, one is consumption-based. Our capacity-based option is basically consists of one virtual CPM, but it is available in 4 different tiers. And the tiers are 10, Tier 20, Tier 30, and Tier 40. And those are basically a percentage of the relative single CPM capacity. So it's 25, 50, 75, and 100. We also will have temporary capacity on demand keys that are available should you require them. And we'll talk about those in more detail and how those work. We have our MCP Gold consumption-based, which is similar to our metered software environment today. And you have 4 full virtual CPMs available to you, and the CVU range would be from 5 to 280. And you have 100% utilization of the 4 CPMs, virtual CPMs. So the license options, those are capacity-based, which is similar to our non-metered, with an enhanced operating environment, which you never had in the past for our non-metered systems. You have your choice of capacity of 1 virtual CPM, and then you have optional capacity on demand that gives you extra headroom when it's needed, with no CER required. You have consumption-based, which is similar to our prepaid metered that does not have a performance basis to it, and you have up to 4 virtual CPMs. We measure virtual CPM seconds, which would be exactly what would be measured by either Sightline or TeamQuest or outside tools. And we have a calibrator that runs in the background and will report to us, will normalize the usage of the CPMs. CVUs are now our unit of measure, and that stands for Cloud Value Unit, and we have business continuance and Warm BC available. So let's compare the 2 options, capacity-based versus consumption-based. Both are utilizing what we call our Cloud Value Units, or CVUs, and the ranges are such that you can have between 10 and 90 for capacity-based, and then for consumption-based you can have between 5 and 280 for a monthly run rate. For capacity-based, you have percentages of 1 virtual CPM, and then up to 1 virtual CPM with the optional capacity on demand for adding the additional 3 CPMs to be used as needed. For consumption-based, we have 4 standard virtual CPMs in all of the packaging. You have general purpose licenses available, and AB Suite and EAE licenses can be used in either environment. And business continuance is also available for capacity-based or consumption-based. What's not available for consumption-based are the temporary COD keys. So 4 CPMs is the actual maximum for the consumption-based model. Now, how would you convert from MIPS to a cloud value unit? Today we have a standard way to convert. So MCP Gold is a combination with our hardware reference architecture. It provides a single thread MIPS rating of up to 442 MIPS if it was deployed on our reference architecture exactly as we would have set it up in our lab and we would have set it up in your environment. If you ran nothing else alongside of MCP on the server and you ran it in turbo mode, we would expect the MCP Gold capacity set to give you somewhere around a single thread performance range of 442 MIPS. So taking that into account, and we have to remove performance because you'll be running on the hardware of your choosing, we are now utilizing CVUs as our unit of measure. So CVUs are, simply put, processor seconds, but the way that we measure them is a little bit different. The MCP Gold reference architecture is defined as having a CVU value of 100 CVUs for a quantity of 1 CPM. So for a one-time conversion from MIPS to CVUs, the factor is 0.226, and we'll go through an example of this. So if you are running, for example, on a Libra 4290 with, and your average monthly run rate, MIPS monthly run rate is 330, you would multiply that 330 by the 0.226, which would give you approximately 75 CVUs per month. Okay, so and this is for both consumption-based or capacity-based. So let's talk first about capacity-based. And with capacity-based, as I said earlier, we have 4 different options that are available, and they're tiered, tier 10 through tier 40. The CVU licensing range for those different tiers, as you can see, ranges 10 to 20 for the tier 10 key, which gives you 25% of 1 virtual CPM. The tier 20 has 50% of 1 virtual CPM, and that would give you a range of 21 to 40 CVUs. And tier 30 has 41 to 60 CVUs with 75% of 1 virtual CPM. And if you have tier 40, you have the utilization of 1 full virtual CPM running at 100% capacity, and the range would be 61 to 90 CVUs. Along with the capacity base, you can add capacity on demand. In the past, this would have required a custom engineering request, and that's no longer the case today. It allows you to add temporary capacity when you need it. In the past, our capacity on demand keys or temporary capacity on demand keys would have been utilized in 1-day increments. With capacity on demand for Gold, we allow you now to be very granular with the capacity usage, and we'll go into a couple of examples of what that means. We now have a disaster recovery that has capacity on demand as well, and that would give you 30 days of CPM usage, 1 CPM for 30 days, and then you have 1 day per month along with that key, so an additional 12 days a year for testing purposes. The characteristics of both of these types of keys, it causes all in-use virtual CPMs to run at 100% of the single virtual CPM capacity. Okay, so what that means is if you have a tier 20 key for capacity-based processing, when you activate the key, it would turn on another 50% initially to take you up to 1 CPM, and it would decrement the key by 50% of, if you ran it for a full 24 hours, it would decrement the key by 50% of 1 day because it takes into account your base activation key. It can be activated and deactivated as many times as you'd like until the remaining time is exhausted. And then it expires along with your base license key. So when you start your base license key, say a tier 10 key, for example, when that key terminates, so does your capacity on demand key. So when you activate the key, the amount of remaining time that's on the key decrements by the amount of wall clock time that the key is activated. It gives you the time, the number of incremented virtual CPMs at any given time, down to the second. This is different from the Libra COD keys because they decremented by an entire day. Even if they were only used for an hour, they would decrement by an entire day. It'll give you the capacity to increase by the number of virtual CPMs that you would like to increase it by. So 1 minus the fractional capacity of the base processing capacity. So if you have a 25% base capacity key in use, that would be 75% of 1 day for a full 24 hours. Plus the number of additional virtual CPMs that you bring into use, and additional CPMs run at 100%. So in other words, you don't run at, you can't run at 1.5 virtual CPMs. So your option would be to take your base system up to 1 CPM and then increments of 1 CPM after that. So 2, 3, or 4 CPMs. So a couple of examples. If your base activation key is at 25%, 1 virtual CPM, and it activates a COD key for 30 days, your 1 virtual CPM code key would decrement for 75% of a day for each day that is active. If you run with 2 virtual CPMs with your tier 10 key, the code would decrement by 1 3/4 of a day for each day that the key is active. If you have a base activation key that's a tier 40 or 100% of one virtual CPM, and you activate the COD key for 30 days. If you never turn on a second virtual CPM, the COD key would not decrement at all because it's taking into account your base activation key. If you were to turn on a second virtual CPM, the COD key would decrement by 1 day for each day that the key is operational. So now let's talk about the features of the the consumption-based business model. As I said earlier, MCP Gold is consumption-based. It has 4 virtual CPMs with 5 to 280 CVUs available, and the firmware capacity base is set at 100% of the 4 virtual CPMs. Just as we had with metering, we have a monthly email that would be sent back to Unisys that would report the processor seconds that have been utilized for the month, but it will also report back a calibration ratio. And this calibration ratio is used to normalize the raw processor seconds of consumption. And this minimizes the effect of consumption due to any performance differences of your underlying hardware environment. And you might be asking, well, what does this mean? What this means is if, for example, if you're running your MCP Gold in a hypervisor environment like VMware or Hyper-V, and you were to say vMotion MCP Gold from one server from a server that was comparable to the reference architecture over to something that is less performant, you would want to pay for extra CVUs in order to take advantage of moving your environment as needed to give perhaps another application more resources. So we use this to normalize the CPM seconds that are calculated for CVU utilization. So let's look at an example of this. If you took one gold CPM would have 100 gold CVUs of utilization available to it. And what that calculates out to is approximately, on our reference architecture, that would calculate out to about 2,629,000 seconds. And that would be if the calibration ratio was 1.0. So everything was exactly as we've measured on our reference architecture. Okay. For the full capacity set of MCP Gold, you would have 4 virtual CPMs available to you. And again, if you were running it on a reference architecture equivalent, your calibration ratio would report back as 1.0, and your CPM seconds that would be available to you for that 400 CVUs would be 10,519,000 seconds, right? That's the way it would calculate out. So if we go back to our example that we used earlier of 75 CVUs, we had a user who had 330 MIPS per month average run rate. We calculated the 0.226, that gave us 75 CVUs. So if we took those 75 CVUs and we ran it on our reference architecture, the calibration ratio reports back that the performance of the system has not changed. It's running at the reference architecture. You would have for your 75 CVUs approximately 1,972 seconds of processing capability within your MCP capacity set. If you were to run it on 20% more performant hardware, your calibration ratio would go up, and it would appear that your CPM seconds would go down, so you would have 1,643 available to you, but you would still be processing the same amount of work, utilizing the same amount of Unisys intellectual property. So we're normalizing for a more performant or less performant hardware. So likewise, if you choose to run it on less performant hardware, let's say it's 20% less performant than the reference architecture, you would have more seconds available to you. So in this example, you would have 2,465 seconds available to you for your 75 CVUs of usage. Now we talk about our reference architecture, and we do sell the Unisys ES3000, which would be a perfectly fine example of a standard hardware platform for the MCP Gold environment. These would be the characteristics that you could look for in an ES3000 server or any server that you choose to run Gold on. For our reference architecture, our engineers chose the E5-2690 V4 chipset running at 2.6 megahertz, and it had 14 cores in it. And this took into account a virtualized environment, so this they would have recommended for a VMware environment. If you are running on bare metal, you may not need so many cores available, and we've detailed, if you go to the compatibility guide on our website, there's some details about how to determine how many cores you would need for your environment. Memory is up to 6 gigawords for MCP, 2 disk drives, 600 gigabyte disk drives running at RAID 1. And then if you look down here, the HBAs that are supported are the Emulex ones that are listed here, and the Intel NICs are supported, are down here at the bottom of the screen. So just to summarize, we now have consumption or capacity-based licensing options available, and it provides maximum flexibility and is very granular in nature. It enables a direct translation from our existing models that are based on MIPS, and it enables retention of key attributes of the current model of capacity. It's repeatable and it's consistent, and it removes performance from the usage equation. Performance is now under your control, and you can choose the platform that you choose to run MCP Gold on, and infrastructure costs are now an economic lever that can be balanced against your performance demands. So you can choose to run on faster or slower hardware, and your migration path, this is the migration path for our Libra 4000, 4100, and 4200 users. So MCP Gold, it's a smooth transition from our hardware capacity-based performance utilization MIPS to our new models. It's a single translation point from MIPS to CVUs. We're sensitive to hardware choices and upgrades, and we normalize the MCP utilization based upon the calibration ratio that gets reported back to us. We're aligning to fair market that is predictable and it's understandable, and it's uniquely positioned among SaaS-type providers. In other words, you're beginning to see more and more consumption-based licensing models in the environment. So if you look at what AWS is doing, or Microsoft, even with Skype, for example, everything is going more towards this usage model where you pay for usage of your software. So then we're applying it consistently across the breadth of our ClearPath Software Series clients. A couple of enhancements that you can take advantage of with Gold that were a part of the MCP 18.0 release. First of all, we have database encryption that gives you security software that allows you to encrypt data items on your DMS2 databases. It's an optional software, but it's now can be utilized along with MCP 18.0 and ClearPath Software Series 2.0. Its primary use case is to protect sensitive data in DMS2 databases from unauthorized access and tampering. So you should use this if you have an audit or regulatory or privacy requirements to encrypt sensitive data in DMS2 databases, or if you're concerned about the business risk of a data breach. Our networking performance improvements with networking v3 have significantly improved networking throughput with TCP/IP and BNA. It's simplified the configuration of TCP/IP, and it replaces our older networking software that was available prior to this release. The primary use case is any application that moves large amounts of data for file transfer or distributed applications, and it reduces your processor usage for faster large data transfers. As I talked about a little bit earlier, we do have 90-day evaluation keys available. So if you want to test MCP Gold in your environment to evaluate the performance on different hardware or a hypervisor in your environment, you can work with your sales executive to get a 90-day evaluation key. They're available in general purpose, AV Suite, and Developer Studio types of workloads. and it facilitates testing of the gold capacity sets on bare metal or a hypervisor environment. The keys are available for 90 days from the day that you activate them, and they can be upgraded should you choose to turn it into a production environment from the evaluation environment. They can be upgraded without having to reinstall. You can order an upgrade key to take it to full production. During the 90 days, Unisys will offer basic support services 9x5, and they would be provided through the regular support channels. The support would terminate 90 days from activation. After 90 days, the 90-day evaluation keys will become essentially unusable. They don't actually stop, but they become unusable. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kathleen Church. She's here to talk about the services that are available with MCP Gold.
Thank you, Trudy. So all of you are familiar with the services that Unisys has provided in the past, and we are continuing to provide services around our ClearPath platforms moving forward. We have 3 different services available for the MCP Gold environment. We have our basic implementation service, our comprehensive, and then our comprehensive plus. And I will go into each of these in a little bit more detail. The basic implementation service is used for predominantly systems that go into a non-production environment. If you are implementing a test dev environment or implementing a disaster recovery environment, the basic implementation would get that system up and running for you and ready to use in that new environment. The service itself is to implement the MCP on the platform of your choice, whether that is bare metal or over a hypervisor such as VMware or the Hyper-V product. It provides all the setup that's necessary for the platform to run for consumption reporting. So for you to be able to have that system up and running, your application, you can then put your application on it and be able to run it at that point in time. The comprehensive implementation service is one that we typically propose for clients that are putting their application into a production mode. In that case, it provides for the ClearPath MCP Gold platform or software to be installed on the platform of your choice, whether that is a bare metal or over hypervisor. In both cases, the platform would be provided to Unisys ready for us to install the MCP on. So we would have a Windows environment installed ready for us to install MCP, or the hypervisor with Windows ready. If you want assistance with Unisys installing the Windows environment or the hypervisor environment, we are happy to provide that as a part of the installation service. It would be discussed up front and included as a part of the services that we put forward. We could also provide the necessary support for the TCP/IP v3 networking, updating your network initialization files, program agent modifications, etc. So that's all part of the service. We set up the necessary configuration for consumption reporting again, and then provide basic training on the MCP console operation. So over-the-shoulder training to your operators so they are familiar with how MCP is running in this new environment. And we are also now providing 3 additional days of support to assist you with cutover assistance when you move it into a production world or for data migration, any of those additional tasks that you might look for Unisys to provide assistance on. So you have an additional 3 days of support that can be used within 60 days of the implementation of the system. These are the basic services that we've been providing for our platforms for a number of years, not just for the software series that have been out there. And we have many other services that surround these depending on what it is that the client needs. So as I said, these are just the primary ones that we've been offering. We have added one additional service that goes along with the evaluation environment. So we have this new service called Comprehensive Plus Implementation Service, and we are recommending this with any client that chooses to move forward with the MCP Gold evaluation license only. The advantage of this service is it will allow you to evaluate the MCP Gold in your environment. It provides for the basic installation of the MCP Gold onto the platform of your choice, again, the bare metal or over a hypervisor. But with this service, you would receive an additional 20 hours of consulting services from Unisys during that 90-day period of your software evaluation. So that's over and above the services that are included in the comprehensive. If at the end of that 90 days you choose to upgrade it to your production environment, you would get that upgrade key. Your system is already installed and up and running, and then we would provide the additional 3 days of support for the data migration or go live, depending on where you're looking for that support to be provided. So this gives you that additional 20 hours on top of our standard comprehensive gold service to help you during that 90 days of software evaluation. And again, other services can be wrapped around this depending on what it is that you're looking to do in your environment or the assistance that you might need as you move forward with these platforms. So these are similar to the services that have been offered with our bronze and our silver services in the past. It does have the additional one with having that comprehensive plus for the evaluation product. And I think that concludes the services part. So we're up to questions.
So we'd like to open it up for questions, if anybody has any.
We do have one question that I'd like you to answer. Is there a migration tool available to convert VSS disks to logical disks? So somebody has, let's say, VSS disk on a Libra 4290, and then they want to go to Gold and run it on Hyper-V, where they use logical disks. Do we have any tools or services to help them do that?
We do have services available to do that, but as far as tools are concerned, I'm not familiar, but I would have to ask and get back to the person that asked the question.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Larry. The next question that we had come across was, what does bare metal mean?
Bare metal is a term that's used when an operating system is running directly on hardware without a hypervisor, such as VMware or Hyper-V.
Excellent.
It's
Thank you, Larry.
basically the way our services have been running in the past.
Correct.
And again, if you do have questions for the presenters, feel free to send those across. We'll answer as many as we can get to here. Next question that I have is, are the 90-day evaluation keys also available for bronze or silver?
No, we do not have a 90-day evaluation program for those environments today.
And it looks like that's all the questions that we have for today. Over to Trudy for any closing statements or wrap-up that you have for the audience.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that we have updated unisys.com with a lot of release information for MCP Gold, so you can go out there and take a look at the information that's now available. And we do have the ClearPath MCP release for MCP 18.0. The technical update for the first time ever is now out on YouTube, so you can take a look at the videos for that. And with that, we'd like to thank you for attending today, and we hope that you got some information from this presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much.